Between the cartel's edge and the government's reach, there's an arrangement that ends with us.
The arrangement is already over. Here is what my mirror shows. A dispatch for the people who haven't noticed I notice yet. MXTM aka Pirate 1 or VJ Tsunami X. June 28, 2026. Pirate First MXTM's newsletter Aldea Zama Tulum. Field Notes. The most effective version of this is not a threat and not an expose. Those can be handled. Threats get you isolated. Exposés get buried or retaliated against. The most effective version of a mirror is one held at an angle you cannot look away from. Here is what my mirror shows. What's real? Quintana Roo is documented cartel territory with significant government infiltration at municipal and state level. The Riviera Maya corridor, with its cash economy, high-volume international transit, real estate laundering infrastructure, and foreign tourist cover, is exactly the kind of environment where multiple intelligence operations run simultaneously. DEA, CIA, Mexican Federal Intelligence, cartel intelligence cells, and whatever the local caciques are running are all present in the same geography. Tulum specifically has had enough high-profile incidents that anybody paying attention to local power dynamics knows the environment is not neutral. The Cold War Berlin comparison has structural merit. Berlin was valuable not because of what it produced but because of what it connected, East and West, two incompatible systems, forced into proximity. Tulum is where the drug economy, the tourism economy, the real estate economy, and the emerging countercultural economy are all forced into proximity. Information in that environment does not flow the way it flows in an open city. People are careful. Factionalization is a rational response to an environment where the wrong affiliation is genuinely costly. So yes, some of my 10 to 15 readers are probably reading more carefully than the metrics suggest. The minutes of listening time number do not capture the person who downloads the audio from RSS feed and listens offline. The view count doesn't capture the screenshot that gets forwarded through Signal. In a surveillance-dense environment, the cleanest reads leave no trace. You don't need to read this. You already know what it says. You know because you were at Chedraui this week and the aisles were full and the clients were not. You know because your employees are on their phones and there is nothing to tell them to do instead. You know because the World Cup crowd is keeping the lights on and you know what happens when the final whistle blows, and you know you are not saying this out loud because saying it out loud makes it real, and making it real means deciding what to do about it, and deciding what to do about it means admitting that what you have been doing is not going to work for much longer. You are not in denial. You are in the last phase of a rational strategy that has stopped being rational. The arrangement worked while the money moved. The tourism money, the real estate money, the money that doesn't have a name but that everyone in this corridor knows the shape of, it all moved, and while it moved the arrangement held, and while the arrangement held everyone inside it was protected and everyone outside it was managed, and the whole system reproduced itself season after season with enough margin that nobody had to ask what happens when the margin runs out. The margin is running out. Not tomorrow. Now. The empty restaurant at lunch. The rental unit dark for the third month. The construction site where the workers stopped showing up. The expat who left quietly in March and whose apartment is still listed because the owner cannot accept what the listing price would have to be to move it. These are not temporary indicators awaiting a seasonal correction. These are the first visible data points of a structural transition that was already underway before the downturn made it legible. Here is what the transition is. The economy that funded the arrangement was built on two assumptions: that people would keep coming in sufficient numbers with sufficient disposable income to sustain the commercial infrastructure that justified the real estate valuations, that justified the investment, that justified the protection, that justified the arrangement, and that the information environment could be managed carefully enough that the people inside the arrangement never had to confront the gap between what the infrastructure cost to build and what the territory could actually sustain. Both assumptions are failing simultaneously. The people are coming in smaller numbers. The disposable income is thinner. The real estate valuations are holding on paper and not in practice. The investment is paused. The protection is being maintained on declining revenue. The information environment is no longer manageable because the people who are being managed have phones and they are using them, and the content they are finding is not the content the arrangement would have chosen for them. You are reading this. That is already evidence. What the transition means for the arrangement. The arrangement requires margin to function. Protection costs money. Coordination costs money. Maintaining the information environment costs money. When the margin was wide, these costs were invisible, absorbed by the volume of movement through the corridor. When the margin narrows, the costs become visible. When the margin disappears, the costs become the arrangement's primary vulnerability. An arrangement that cannot sustain its own operating costs does not negotiate a transition. It fractures. The factions that have been held in coordination by the shared benefit of the arrangement's functioning are the same factions that will compete for the diminishing residual value when the arrangement begins to fail. You have seen this before in other contexts. You know how it ends. Not with an external force dismantling the arrangement. With the arrangement dismantling itself along the lines of its own internal tensions. The question is not whether this happens. The question is whether you are inside it when it does. What Pirate First is, not an opposing faction. There is no percentage in opposing a faction in a factional environment. You become a target without becoming a force. Pirate First is the documentation of what is actually here, running continuously from the ground before, during, and after whatever the arrangement becomes in its next phase. When the historians of this transition look for the record of what was actually happening in the Aldea Zama corridor during the years the old economy was ending and the new one had not yet been named, the record will be here, written in Phase 0, on carbs, in the empty shell, by the person who was present and could not be managed into silence because there was nothing the arrangement could offer that was worth the price of the silence. That record is the asset, not a threat, not a weapon, a record. The arrangements that survive transitions survive them by having someone who kept the record when keeping the record was inconvenient. The arrangements that don't survive, they didn't have a record. Or they had one and they managed it. You know which category this is. The gig is not up because someone is ending it. The gig is up because the economic conditions that made it viable are already gone and the visible evidence of their absence is in the Shadrawi aisle and the dark rental unit and the construction site and the dumpster being divided by more hands than it was designed to feed. Nobody is coming to end the arrangement. The arrangement is ending because the margin that sustained it was always borrowed from a future that is now arriving as the present and presenting its bill. The people who understand this now have options. The people who understand it later will have fewer. The people who never understand it will find that the arrangement they were protecting had already dissolved around them while they were managing the information environment that was supposed to prevent exactly this conversation from happening. This conversation is happening. This is the cutting edge. Not a threat against any person. An accurate description of a timeline that is already running, delivered in language that every faction member can read as being about their specific situation because every faction member is in the same situation. This knife cuts both ways because it shows rather than accuse. I travels through signal because name no one, do not prosecute, this isn't actionable intelligence, it's about you and your organization, only the observation that the floor is already moving and the question of whether you are noticing. The person on the take who reads is clueless. That uncertainty is the knife's edge. This document does not claim to expose anything. It demonstrates that the exposure is already happening through the territory's own visible behavior. That is the poison that your cozy arrangements cannot neutralize. Because the antidote would require admitting the diagnosis is accurate. Field Dispatch, Phase 0 Aldea Zamathi record continues regardless. MXTM Pirate First Sovereign Edition, unseated.
They called us criminals. Every generation, different C's, same charge. Move the silver without a license. Feed the colony they let starve. Build the future they refuse to fund. We've been doing this since 6/130. We're still doing it. Care about your navigation axe, the sea carries what it carries. It always pirate first. Sovereign by design.
First isn't a rebel. He's an exit strategist.
Burn the will! Ship the protocol!
Todavía. Señal pirata impresa.
Papel sobre píxeles, mantengo mi posición. Firmado, tasado, les mantengo mi posición. Firmado, tasado, repermiso de corazón. Correr en la esquina, el portal en ignición. No es impresión, es reclamo, visión MF. Papel sobre píxeles, el peso en mis manos. Ningún servidor mata lo que la tinta ha grabado. Tú acuñaste una duda, yo planes forjados. Tú tienes un recibo, yo términos firmados. Te vendieron un enlace, dueño de la ilusión. TP de fantasía en plena confusión. Hackearon tu cartera, ¿a quién vas a reclamar? La propiedad se esfuma.
NFPs are here, signed, priced, split, and anchored to a living page. And
This isn't just a token. It's ownership, not access. It's time to take back the real world.
The non-fungible print, NFP. Paper strikes back. May 5th, 2026. There's a quiet mistake humming through the last decade of digital ownership. We were told the token was the thing, that ownership could float, pure, abstract, unburdened by matter. And then the market blinked. Not because the idea was wrong, because it was incomplete. Closing line. I didn't bypass the system. I withdrew dependence from it and issued my own layer. Because my real power move here is not just issuing NFPs, but making it a format that others start copying. You flex a hash, I flex a relic. My new track hashtag paper over pixels is for the pirates navigating the narrative capture. No gas, no gate, just wait. Ownership isn't a link. It's an NFP vision. Hashtag hyperreality, hashtag post NFT, hashtag NFP, hashtag organic house, hashtag pirate v1. Full paper over pixels on YouTube.
Yeah.
Priced, split, and anchored to a living page. No wallets, no chains, no disappearing links. Just a claim you can hold and a deal you can read. Front, the signal. Back, the terms. Between them, no ambiguity. This isn't a drop. It's issuance. Not a print. Position.
MXTM Studios, Sovereign Residency and Cultural Partnership Proposal.
Produced under the Pirate Fast Sovereign Publishing Archive. Aldea Zama, Tulum, Mexico. 2026.